Hey, welcome back to Zombie Tactics for part 2 of technology and technique, tech and technique. I've got to apologize to you. I'm adding a third T today, and that's going to be the territory. And the reason for that is that we're talking about what are the best techniques and what's the best technology to use given your circumstances. And if we're going to talk about your circumstances, we kind of have to roll some things into that, one of them being the territory. And by the territory, I don't mean just physically where you are, or whether it's rainy or sand or mud or what. I mean, what's your role in life? What's your mission, if you want to call it that way? And how does that affect your choice of the technologies that you'll use? And because of that, how does that affect the techniques that are the best ones, the most optimized ones to meet your circumstance? I've been in these classes before where you are next to some guy who's an accountant, and you say, okay, this guy introduced himself as an accountant. Why is he in this class fully kitted up with, plate carrier and leg rig and the whole bit like that? And you giggle to yourself for a second because you go, this guy's an accountant. He's having tactical fantasy band camp weekend here. But then you find out, oh, he's an accountant right now, but he is a former Marine. He's still in the reserves. He could be called up at any time because he is in the reserves and he wants to keep his skills sharp. Oh, wait a minute. That just kind of changed everything, didn't it? It makes sense now that he would be training that way because that's the territory that he's training for. If he was just an accountant and he's more concerned with self-defense during fairly ordinary times, it wouldn't make any sense for him to do that. Then it would be that tactical fantasy band camp mentality that you do occasionally see. So the territory encompasses all that kind of stuff. Obviously, our territory, the one I'm usually talking about on my channel, is that citizen self-defense, category. We're not going to grab one of these and go to the AM/PM mini market to get a 32-ounce Big Gulp. Or if you're the kind of person that would do that, please let me know in advance so that I don't have to be anywhere near there. But it's a little more subtle than that even. Even if we say, all right, I'm a citizen, I'm going to be carrying a pistol for self-defense, the technology that we choose is obviously going to be a little different in some ways. I mean, we might, under some circumstances, use something like this, a simple Kydex shell holster outside the waistband. And we might wear that in a variety of different positions on our belt, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, whatever, and that would work just fine for us with a concealment garment. That's going to affect some things about how we might employ this pistol as well. You might not think so, but we're going to get there. Or, if we're a citizen carrying concealed, we might use something like this very excellent inside the waistband holster from, who is this? This is Aegis Armory. This is their shield holster. An excellent hybrid holster of leather and Kydex. I'll be doing a full review of this pretty soon. I think a number of people have been doing reviews. And this, of course, is designed to be worn either outside the waistband or inside the waistband. It's kind of a convertible, and it's definitely going to be at kind of that 4 o'clock, 4:30 position back on your hip, and that's the reason for it having a cant like this. Some things are going to work really well with this kind of a holster, other things not so much. And hopefully that's obvious, but if it's not, we'll get there in this video or in part 3 of this series. Maybe we're a patrol officer or in a SWAT team or something. We might be wearing something like this thigh rig from HT Holsters. And depending upon exactly what we're going to be doing, it might even affect where we're going to wear this thigh rig on our body. If you are under some circumstances, you'll wear it at a 3 o'clock position. If you're in a mounted position where you're often riding in a vehicle, it's the preference of those kind of guys to wear it slightly forward on the hip, maybe in about a 2 o'clock position, because it keeps it from getting in the way of seat belts and things like that. So right off the bat, even there, a subtle thing about whether we're in a one kind of service or another makes a difference as to what technique we use, what we do in terms of where we're going to hold the holster and how we're going to employ it in our day-to-day duty or our role in life or our mission. But, even, we're just kind of talking about holsters, but even if I'm taking something like this, a simple Uncle Mike's paddle holster, and this can be adapted to a variety of different uses. It's made to be worn straight on a belt or in a canted position, one way or the other. It's left or right-handed, and it also has with it, you can't see it, but there's some belt loops that come with this that you could actually use this as a simple inside the waistband holster. Well, if we're going to carry a smaller gun, that might make a difference as to how we're going to work that smaller gun than a larger gun in a citizen self-defense context. Now, territory also involves making sure that we understand what our role is and how that affects our decisions. It's not just saying, well, I'm a citizen, so I'm going to do this. I'm going to carry a small gun, and I'm just going to take off merrily. No, we have to stop and think about what is our role and what is it that we really do. Well, obviously, as citizens, we're not, stacking up with a SWAT team or hostage rescue team or anything like that and busting into buildings. So obviously, none of our techniques and our technology needs to revolve around that kind of a scenario or that kind of a role or a mission in life. We're probably going to be carrying a pistol, and most of the instances or incidents that we're going to encounter are going to be things of a certain kind. Now, if we go to the statistics, we'll find out that the FBI keeps pretty good track of numbers of like this, and other organizations do as well. And there are about 30,000 instances per year where someone is shot with a firearm of some kind and dies. Okay? That's and dies. People killed with a firearm. Now that number sounds a little high until we start taking a look at things like the fact that about 18,000 of those are suicides. So that doesn't really mean anything about what we would employ as a normal law-abiding citizen going about our day-to-day lives. There isn't really any technique to suicide with a gun. You put one in the chamber, you point it at your head, and you pull the trigger, and that's it. I mean, we really can't learn anything from that other than the fact that mental health is an important thing, and we should take care of those around us and strive to do a better job of that. But so if we subtract that 18,000, what do we end up with? Well, we end up with about 12,000 instances, and those are both instances where a criminal is shooting someone who is unarmed, a criminal is shooting someone who is armed, a good guy is shooting back at a criminal who is armed with a knife or gun or whatever, and those are we end up with about 12,000 instances left. Well, we're not criminals, so we're not really going to worry about what criminals do other than making sure that we're considering how that affects us. But it's important to realize that not all 12,000 of those instances are ones where it's a criminal shooting a criminal shooting a good guy, or a good guy shooting a criminal or a bad guy. Overall, what we learned out of this is it's pretty rare, honestly, still, and getting rarer as the numbers seem to be going down and trending down, that we're going to be involved in some kind of an incident where we're going to lose our lives with a firearm involved. Even so, though, we have to take into account the fact that somewhere, depending upon which group of statistics we look at, there are about 100,000 to 2.5 million instances per year where a good guy, a citizen, a law-abiding person, uses a firearm to defend themselves against a criminal. Whether that criminal's armed or not is another question. But defend themselves against a bad guy, somebody who's trying to rape them, mug them, home invasion, robbery, attempted murder, whatever. Somewhere between 100,000 and 2.5 million. And most people kind of figure that with the different ways that these statistics are gathered, some of them aren't very good on the low end, some of them aren't, really specifically all that great on the high end. So you kind of take a look at the studies in the middle, and you're going to come up with about 1 million, 1.5 million instances per year where a citizen uses a gun to defend themselves. And that's a pretty good conservative number to say 1.5 million. Well, if that's happening that many times a year, but we know that, wow, in all the instances other than suicide, it only amounts to 12,000 actual deaths, what we can conclude from that is that not everybody's getting killed in these instances. Matter of fact, if we look into the statistics, we'll find that a lot of times people aren't firing the gun at all. They're simply saying to themselves, "You get out of my house or I'm going to shoot you." And the criminal goes, "Well, I'm out of here, there's a gun." Or the person grabs the gun and fires around, doesn't even hit the person, and the person goes, "Crap, I'm out of here, somebody got a gun, they're shooting." Or they shoot them and it's a wound that is non-life-threatening, or they get prompt medical care, one of those two things. So just because someone's using a firearm doesn't always mean that they're killing somebody. So that's something we have to keep in mind. But even so, if we take a look at those numbers, we've got a fair chance of being involved in an instance like that, but it really is pretty rare. There are a lot of other things that are much more common in our society than having to use a gun to protect ourselves. So we're planning for something that's kind of an unlikely instance. Now, what can we find out more about it? Well, about all of those instances, when we put them all together, most of them lumping together, even things like home invasion robberies and stuff like that, most of those instances happen outside the home. So one of the things we find out is they happen at close distance, at bad breath or conversational distance, that kind of thing. And that makes sense, because if somebody's going to rape you or mug you or hit you over the head with a sledgehammer, they got to be pretty close to you to do that. So we find out that in the high 80 percentile is happening right at that, I'm right in your space distance, somewhere between, what they call 2 arms lengths distance. You put your arm out, the other person puts their arm out. If they'll touch, then that's the distance we're talking about. And that could be everything from right up in your face to a couple feet, maybe 3 yards, or 1 yard, 3 yards, something like that. 0 to 10 feet. High 80 percentile, that happens right up there. We add to that maybe getting out to 5 yards, 7 yards, and now we're encompassing all but the rarest of instances. Once you get above about 7 yards, that's only a couple percentage points out of that whole group. That 0 to 7 yards is probably in the 90th percentile of and everything else is out there somewhere. So the idea that we have to put all of our training into shooting at very long distances doesn't make a lot of sense. And the techniques and the technology that we use to accomplish that, we have to consider that as well. So we're really worried about right up front, or pretty doggone close, as an ordinary citizen living our day-to-day life. That's the context that we're talking about when we're talking about technology and techniques that are well optimized for those things. Now, this video is a bit of a setup, because what I want to do in the next video, here's kind of a preview. I want to show you some ways that some assumptions that we make about techniques that work well in one environment, they don't work so well in another environment. And honestly, if we do that, we're going to put ourselves at a disadvantage if we're that person trying to defend ourselves, our lives, or the lives of someone in our care against that kind of an attack. And vice versa, for that matter. Something that works really well in one case doesn't work well in another. And what is kind of setting this off is I've seen a lot of talk on the internet where people will argue about what is the best way to do something, or the best piece of gear to have. Oh, this is the best gun. This is the best way to draw it. This is the best way to hold it. This is what you ought to do with it. And they treat it in a very dogmatic fashion, as though it's totally black and white. And the reason why they're going to tell you that that's the one and only true way is because, their mother-in-law was a volunteer crossing guard for the FBI, and that's how they trained. Sometimes this stuff gets a little crazy. You have people talking about draw strokes and what's the right gun, what's the right holster, what's the right technique, and it gets a little bit crazy. And what we need to do is we kind of need to, draw a circle around that is, where do we live? What's our role in life? What's our mission in life when we're going to the grocery store to get a gallon of milk? Or something like that, and we want to defend ourselves as ordinary citizens. So this is a setup in part 2 for what's going to come in part 3, where I'm going to demonstrate some specific pieces of technology or kit and some specific techniques that work really well for us as citizens, but not necessarily the best thing in other circumstances, and vice versa, and how that ought to affect our thought processes for choosing the right technology and techniques to fit our terrain in our daily lives. That's Zombie Tactics for today. As always, aim for the head and keep your powder dry. Bye-bye.